Hello everybody, I am PxlGrease, and in this video I want to cover the 5 things that will take you back to NES gaming. So before we get started, I want to do a quick plug here. I stream on Twitch, I stream retro games, so if you could, please check me out on that platform. I'm trying to get more viewership and push myself to get to partner. You can find me on there at twitch.tv/PxlGrease, that's PxlGrease. So let's get right into the list here. The 5 things that make you think of NES gaming. So the first one that comes to mind when I think of the NES era and the SNES era really is the instruction manual. Oh my gosh. So the instruction manual was the hype train for the game, right? So you didn't have the internet, you didn't have a way to go and look things up. Really, you had magazines that could talk about games, you had the box art of the game when you got to the store, and then you also had commercials, but the commercials were really limited, and usually they were like a lot of games combined into a commercial. So the instruction manual was paramount. So you got the game, you opened the box of the game, and you'd have an instruction manual. I've got one here. Here's one for TMNT 2, the arcade game. It's actually in really good shape. The light makes it look a little faded, but yeah, these bad boys were amazing. So you could open them up and you could flip through them, and you'd have things like this that would be like the characters that are in the game. They would talk about the enemies and the player characters that you would play as. And in RPGs, they would go into more details, like the items that you could collect, or the townspeople that you might run into, the locations. It was really, really cool. But this is the way you got hyped up for the game. You know, you'd read this on your way home, or I would, because I was a kid, riding in the car home, just so excited, couldn't wait to play the game. So the instruction manual to me instantly makes me think of NES games. Number 2 that I've got on the list is blowing out the NES cartridge. How many times in my lifetime have I had to do this right here? And slide it back in the control deck and hope it works. So the NES was actually made in the US. The NES had a faulty pin connector, which means that games would not always work. In fact, quite often they didn't work, and you would have to pull the cartridge out, blow on it, which would actually make the contacts, work a little better, and then plug it back into the console and press the power button. Now, there was a lot of little tricks. Personally, I used the trick where you would pat the side of the console. Sometimes I would pat the side a little too hard out of frustration. Sorry, NES. But you would basically just keep working with it until you got the console to come on. That is the only console I am aware of that you actually had to do this on. So that is just a big time indicator to me for the NES era. Next up is Nintendo Power or gaming magazines. Oh my gosh. So Nintendo Power was the magazine for me as a kid. It came out monthly. You get it pretty early in the month. It would talk about, if I remember that right, it would talk about games that were coming out. It would talk with developers of game companies that were making games. It would do reviews on those games. It would also had this section in it called classified information, which was like a few yellow pages that would basically explain tips or tricks about a game, or give you passwords. Like I used that once for Star Tropics. When the sub is submerged and you're trying to make it resurface, you have to have a passcode, and that passcode in this particular game came on a letter that you had to dip in water. Well, if you didn't have the letter, because I rented the game, and most of the time when you rented a game, you didn't have the instruction manual, you didn't have that passcode. And if you didn't know anybody that knew what that passcode was, then you were just SOL, because again, no internet. So what you had to do was, if you didn't have that, then you had to either know someone that knew it, or you had to refer to a tip magazine like that. So it was really helpful as a kid, and just to me, Nintendo Power just goes hand in hand with Nintendo, the NES. Next is the demo stations. These were so cool. So I remember the ones in KB Toys as a kid. They had one that was I forget what it was actually called, but it was basically a monitor or a TV, and it had a Nintendo in it, and it had 4 buttons that were different games for the NES that you could actually play. You push a button, it would flip the game to that button, You would hit start to start the game. You'd play the game for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever the limit was, and then it would auto reset and let someone else come up and play. Super cool. It really, really was the start of that sort of thing. I'm not aware of Atari doing anything like that, but really, really neat, and it really makes me think of the era of the NES. Probably one of the ones I'm the most reminiscent about are the cartoons. Man, the cartoons were so cool back in the day. So you had 3 different cartoons. One of the ones I feel like is the most remembered now is Captain N, the Game Master. That cartoon was amazing. So the premise was this kid got pulled into the TV, into the video game world, and he had to go around helping the video game characters solve their problems of their worlds. He fought against Eggplant Man, Mother Brain, and a couple other villains. And he worked with the likes of Mega Man, Kid Icarus, Simon Belmont. You had Samus had a few episodes in there. You had, who else am I forgetting about? Link was in there for a couple of episodes. So it was really, really cool. But it wasn't the only cartoon. There was also Super Mario Brothers Super Show, which seemed to air a lot. Like, I feel like that show was on a whole lot more than Captain N was. It was really, really neat. And it shared a block with a Legend of Zelda cartoon that had, you know, the infamous Link saying the infamous line, "Excuse me, princess," which was, it was something. But yeah, the cartoons were really, really cool. Ultimately, I really liked the Legend of Zelda one. I didn't really like Link in that one, but whatever. I mean, people really loved that, so hey, whatever works for you. Actually, that's a pretty good idea for a video in the future. Maybe I'll go over those cartoons and how I felt about those. But for now, that's going to do it for me. Thanks so much for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button if you wouldn't mind. I'd really, really appreciate it. And make sure you check me out on Twitch. This is PxlGrease telling you to enjoy your game.